Hey guys, it's Kesara, and today I'm going to be doing a review for The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. So in my July TBR, I had a poll for which reread you guys wanted me to do, and The Night Circus won. So I ended up rereading The Night Circus this month, and now it's time for a review. So this is actually my third time reading The Night Circus. I read it for the first time last year, I think in January or close to the beginning of the year. Honestly, I was a little disappointed by it. I read the physical book the first time around, and I was just really caught up in the plot and the world building. And while the world building is fantastic, the plot kind of let me down a little bit, and I wasn't really attached to the characters that first time around. The second time around, I decided to give The Night Circus a second chance by listening to the audiobook. And I absolutely fell in love with this book last year when I listened to the audiobook. It was so good. I absolutely love the audiobook. It is narrated by Jim Dale, who's like one of my favorite audiobook narrators. He just has this like lyrical quality to his voice that just is so fun to listen to. And pair that with Erin Morgan's writing, which is just so beautiful, and the images she makes are just so well done that the audiobook is just a dream to listen to. So this third time around, I decided to listen to the audiobook again because I couldn't not listen to the audiobook again if I was going to reread this book, just because it's so good, like so good. Absolutely loved it. So I ended up giving this one 5 stars. That being said, just because I gave it 5 stars doesn't mean I don't have critiques of it. Because like I said, the reason why I read this book mainly now is for the writing style, because the writing style is just so beautiful. But I do still have critiques for some of the other aspects of the book. I talk about 4 things when I do these reviews. So generally I start with characters, then I move on to plot, do world building, and lastly I talk about author's writing style. So first of all, let's talk about the characters. So we're following the main characters of Celia and Marco, who are basically put into this situation at a very young age where they're in sort of like a competition. They don't really know how this competition works or what the rules of this competition are. Basically, they just have to do magic and try to out-magic each other. They don't know who their opponent is gonna be or anything like that. Of course, Marco does get to see Celia and know who she is, but for the longest while, she doesn't know that he's her opponent, even though she knows him. So that's like, I love that aspect of it. The setting of this competition for them is the Night Circus, which I will get to when we get to the world building section because it's fantastic. Celia and Marco are the main characters of this book, and I absolutely love them. The first time around, I honestly was not attached to them at all. Like, not at all. They have a very interesting relationship that every time I reread this book, I just get more and more attached to the relationship they have and the way they get to know each other, because they get to know each other through their magic. Because for the longest while, they're not, you know, in the same place. They're very far apart in the story, and it's just through their magic, which is like artwork basically, that they get to understand and learn how the other person thinks and stuff like that. And I absolutely love it. There are a few other main characters. There's Poppet and Widget, who are super cute, and they're twins that are born at the opening of the Night Circus. They're very interesting. I really like Poppet. I don't really have a whole lot of opinions of Widget. And then there's Bailey, who is another character around their age, who is one of the people who actually attend the Night Circus. He's a guest, I guess, if that makes sense, or carnival goer, something like that. And he has an interesting situation too. But I think kind of the most interesting characters in the story would have to be Prospero the Enchanter, which is Celia's father, and the man in the gray suit, which is kind of Marco's teacher person thing. They're basically the ones that have this competition going and creating all of the stuff that happens in this world. And I really enjoy them because they're not likable characters. Like, neither of them are particularly nice or good people, but they do things in a way that I can't help but like them. Some of the things that Prospero the Enchanter does to his daughter Celia is kind of like almost abusive, but at the same time, like, I understand why he's doing that. He's teaching her. It's interesting. Like, And his arc is very interesting. I don't want to go too far into what his arc actually is, but it is definitely really interesting, and I really like that aspect of it. There are a ton of other characters in this book. There are a ton of other like people connected to the circus. I think the two other ones that I'm gonna mention are Tsukiko and Isabel. So Isabel is a character who meets Marco, and she is a fortune teller. So she kind of sees the future and stuff like that. And then Tsukiko is a contortionist, and she has a really interesting plot line as well. I think both of them have very, very interesting plot lines. The thing about the characters in this story is you don't really get to know them very well. And I think that has to do with the point of view, because the point of view is very much a third person limited point of view. You never really get inside anyone's heads or anything like that, so you don't really see what they're thinking. You just kind of see what they do, and so you never really get to know these characters that well. Like, I feel like the only reason I'm as attached to these characters as I am is because I've read this book 3 times now. Like, on the first go around, I didn't care for any of the characters whatsoever. So like, the characters are great, but you don't really get to know them that well like the first time around in the story. You really have to pay attention to all the details to get to know these characters. So the next thing I want to talk about is the plot. And honestly, I think the plot is probably the weakest aspect of this book, because it has this tension to it that is really interesting and keeps building and building and building. And I just feel like the climax is a little bit of a letdown. Like, it's not as climactic as I would have wanted it to be. It's interesting, like the idea behind it, but I felt like it didn't quite gut me the way I would want a climax to gut me. So that is the only like real critique I have of this book. Other than that, I absolutely love it. One thing I will say about the plot is that there is kind of a romantic plot here, which is fantastic. I absolutely love the way the romantic plot is done here. The first time I read this book, I hated it. I didn't feel it at all, but every time I reread it, I love it more and more and more. So yes, I definitely love that aspect of it. Next, we're going to talk about world building. So the world building in this, I think, is done fantastically. Now, mind you, it's not the type of book I would normally pick up, especially world building wise, just because I love grand epic worlds and stuff like that. I read a lot of high fantasy, and the world building is done in a very contained setting, specifically the circus. But each of the different tents is so interesting and so well imagined here that it's just a dream to read each and every one of them, and I really, really enjoy it. Part of the world building that I also really like is the reverse. I think that's how you pronounce it. I really enjoy that aspect of it, just having these people that are following the circus around. It's just kind of like a really interesting and like magical touch to it that I just really love. And it gives you the sense that there's this whole other society that most people don't even really know. It's like, it gives you that underground magic society sort of feel to it that you don't get in a lot of books either. And I just love that aspect of it. Last but not least, we're gonna talk about writing style. And oh my gosh, the writing style in this book is probably the best I've ever read. I've said this in my reading vlog like multiple times, but I just love Erin Morgenstern's writing style so much. One thing I really love about her writing style is the imagery, because the thing about her imagery versus other authors is like most of the other authors that I have read will give you this image and you can picture it, but it's a very static image. Erin Morgenstern gives you a dynamic image, so you can see the image moving and flowing. It almost feels like you're reading a movie because you can see everything happen as you're reading the book, and I just absolutely love that aspect of it. It is what makes this book for me. Like the characters don't do it for me, the plot really doesn't do it for me, even the world building is not the kind of world building that I would typically enjoy, but because it's written in such a beautiful way, I just love it so much, and because of that, it's one of my favorite books of all time. If you've read this book, let me know down in the comments because I would love to discuss it with you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. I post videos frequently on this channel, so consider subscribing. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up to support my channel. All social media links are in the description down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!